Justice Kennedy, I understand that you found some documents in the Supreme Court archives that describe a meeting between President Truman and then Governor Earl Warren before he went on the Supreme Court during the 1948 campaign. Can you tell us about that?
In the 1948 campaign, everyone knew that Dewey would be elected. Truman was just too unpopular. So Dewey made a mistake. He didn't have a campaign. He didn't promise anything. He didn't have any specific thing. Earl Warren was his running mate. And Truman decided to take his whistle stop tour. He was on a train and he went across the country and he would stop in big towns, small towns, and from the rear car he'd stand on the platform and address the crowd. His train came to California and pulled into Truckee, California, which is on the east side of the Sierra Nevadas, and stopped to put on an additional engine to go over the summit. I think the trains, some of them still do that. And it was quite late at night, probably 11, midnight, something like that. Earl Warren, who's running against him on the Dewey ticket, gets on the train and said, "Mr. President, as governor of California, it is my duty and my pleasure to honor you, to welcome you to our state, and to wish you well." The press never picked it up. In those days, there were certain things that politicians could tell each other that the press just didn't report. But this was really a remarkable event, and it showed, again, a culture, a time in which there was a decency and a civility that we're lacking today.
Now, I understand that you and your father were at the Whistle Stop campaign in Sacramento.
Yes.
What was that like?
Well, the train proceeded to Sacramento, it has never been my pleasure and excitement to see a president. So my father knew exactly where to stand. And we were within, I guess, maybe 15 yards of the president. And he was a remarkable man. He was powerful. You could tell that there was a decency and an honesty about it. You could tell that he was honest with what he was talking to you about. My father, in California, those times we had, parties were not important. He was probably a Republican, but we crossed party lines a lot in voting. And I'm sure he voted for Warren because our family knew where Warren was well. But my father thought that Truman was a marvelous president.
Now, Justice Kennedy, you have taught summer school at the University of Salzburg in Austria as part of the summer program of the McGeorge School of Law at the University of the Pacific. Given what's going on today, what's the future of international law and the organizations that President Truman oversaw being established in the late 1940s and early 50s?
I am concerned that national governments want to go their own way. It's part of a culture in which people want something immediate and they don't look at the longer-term ethical consequences of what their decisions are. Truman, as indicated in my remarks, immediately thought that it would be absolutely necessary to have a very strong international understanding and enforceable understanding against the use of atomic weapons. We never did get that, and this is a matter of great concern. International law began with the law between, say, Britain and France over fishing right, two countries. Then it extended to the way one nation was treating another nation's nationals. Then it came to mean how a country is treating its own nationals because of human rights. Of course, the United States must take the lead. in showing that human rights must be respected by every nation. And my remarks were somewhat curtailed, but the young people here should know that democracy is being diminished around the world. There are studies, and we're talking about India, Brazil, major countries like that, Hungary, Poland. Democratic rights are being taken away. And the problem is that the people don't care. One time I was in Europe to lecture to a group of judges, and then we met with some young people afterward. And she said, Mr. Justice, there are two problems in my country. One is the rule of law is slipping away. The other is that everyone knows it, but few seem to care. We have to care. And that's what the Truman Foundation does.
Throughout your career, you have been a strong defender of the First Amendment. And in the Citizens United case that you wrote, you spoke of the confidence and stability in civic discourse that the First Amendment must secure. What do you think about how the First Amendment will stand given some of the recent legislation that has sought to instruct people what to teach and what not to teach and what should be in public libraries?
As still a regular member of the federal judiciary, we can't comment on specific cases. But let me say this. If you had asked me 10, 15 years ago, is the First Amendment law settled? I said, well, yes, we know First Amendment law. There'll be difficult cases. But with the advent of the internet and with the increasing public awareness on issues such as you just state, we have to begin all over again. And we're going to have a series of cases in order to determine what the First Amendment does and should mean in the context of these times. What you ask is a very, very important case because it involves local control, it involves the rights of the teacher, it involves the rights of the parent, it involves the best interests of the child. And in all of this, not only we had the First Amendment to consider, but you have federalism. What control should local people have over their own school districts, over their own government? So you have not only First Amendment principles, but you have federalism principles.
Interesting. Your majority opinion in the Obergefell case, which held that same-sex couples may exercise the fundamental right to marriage, you wrote, "The nature of justice is that we may not always see it in our own times." And you observed that when new insights revealed discord between the Constitution's central protections and a received legal stricture, a claim of liberty must be addressed. When you refer to new insight, what kind of form do you see that taking to get us to a point where there would be a change in the law?
Well, of course, as lawyers know, the law in part is based on common sense, and we can't always know what the world is like around us. The present is sometimes more difficult to understand than the future. We know what the future will be, at least we hope. We're probably wrong, but we think we know. The past, we know, although we should study it more. The present can be somewhat amorphous, but we can see, and this is the nature of a democratic society, we can see how some laws work and some don't. And we can see how some laws have applications that we just didn't even think about. And the framers use broad terms like liberty, property, life. If the framers had known all of the details of a just society, they would have put them down. They were conscious enough of their own limitations that they did not presume to say what all of the aspects of a just society were. They used spacious words so that over time we could discover what it really means.
Mr. Justice, I thought it would be appropriate to have one of the law students attending the luncheon to ask a question. As you know,
those are always hard questions.
Well, as you know, in the early 1920s, Harry Truman took night courses at the then called the Kansas City School of Law. That institution now is the School of Law at the University of Missouri of Kansas City. This question comes from Margaret Stansel, who will graduate this year from UMKC Law School. What do you feel is the biggest difference between the Supreme Court when you were appointed in 1988 and the current court?
That's a really good question. And tonight, when I'm trying to get to sleep, I'll think of a good answer. But it does show that major questions can be discussed in terms of principles and philosophy. It wouldn't take us too long if we sat here for us to find something we disagree about. But the fascination of a decent society is we can talk about it and learn about it. And that's what this court does, and this court still sets a good example. Justice Byron White once told me that every time you have a new justice, you have a new court. When Justice Breyer was our junior justice for 11 years, for 11 years, 9 of us were in the same room. And I knew that you knew that I knew that you knew what you were going to say next. But we then explored it further, and it was fascinating.
In the 1980s and 90s, the Senate typically confirmed Supreme Court nominations by overwhelming majorities. You were confirmed 97-0. The margins, the margins then began to decline, and if my math is right, in the past 5 years, no nominee has received more than 54 votes. Is this a development that could lead to the loss of confidence in the Supreme Court?
I'm not sure loss of confidence, but the political branches must be cautious about allowing partisan influences to have a dominant role in the selection of a justice. And when partisanship prevails, then a justice is labeled by a partisan. And there are many, many qualities of a judge that you must inquire about rather than his or her political beliefs. And that has become, in part because of what the senators themselves and the Congress themselves say, in part what the president say, in part trying to please a base. As I indicated, Truman, who was kind of an old boy now, he knew all of its appointees fairly well. But he appointed Harold Burton. He was a Republican. He thought it would be a good gesture to the Senate. He was confirmed unanimously in a matter of days. Now, the president should be very, very careful about the academic qualifications of the justice. We were talking earlier when on my first coming to this court, it seemed to me that, well, this is just another court, like the Court of Appeals. I thought, it's different. This court makes decisions that can't readily be changed over time. And it's like the old analogy is as an ocean liner. When we start to make a turn, we can't just quickly zag back.
Justice Kennedy, you and other justices have occasionally been called swing votes. Is that an annoying simplification, or is there some truth in this description?
Well, it's something of a simplification. My comment always has been the cases swing, I don't. I'm consistent, but the cases swing back and forth. It does have the visual symbol of swinging back and forth, which is a little odd. It's very clear to me that I think my jurisprudence is consistent.
When Justice O'Connor got our honoree, I think I told you that she told the story about President Truman and Justice Black after Truman had lost the steel seizure case, and President Truman complimented Justice Black, not on his law, but pouring a mighty fine bourbon. So I wondered if you had a presidential anecdote you might share with us.
Well, when Ronald Reagan asked me to come back to Washington to see him about taking this position, we discussed it at home. My wife discussed it with me. We were from the same mid-sized town, Sacramento. Our children, we thought, would still all be Californians. They'd been to school in California, one at Stanford, one had just graduated, the others were still there. There was nothing in Washington for them. Mary didn't know anybody. She was a teacher, had a few years left to get her full retirement. And so I told the president, I said, you have some time. I said, Mary agrees with me, we're not too excited about coming back here. I said, we don't know anybody. He said, oh, you know me. I said, what am I supposed to do, come over for lunch? And he said, no, the rule is that if I ask you, you have to come. And when he was governor and I was in and out of his office, I was a private attorney, but I used to advise him. He would often says, the rule is, and I'd say, no, Governor, I tell you the rule. You do what you want, but I tell you the rule. So I said, now are you going to tell me the rule again? And he laughed and he laughed. But he was correct. It was something that we had to do. As it turned out, all of our children through jobs and marriages live on the East Coast. So it turned out we would have been saving our frequent flyer miles to come back and see the kids.
Very good, very good. Well, Justice Kennedy, thank you very much for sharing your stories and your views on the law. This has been just an enriching experience. I do also want to thank two other UMKC law students, Daniel Foose and Ryan Head, who helped frame several of the issues that we discussed today. I hope that at some future time that you and Mrs. Kennedy will come to Kansas City and we can show you some Truman sites and we can visit the Truman Library with its brand new museum.
Maybe we can be like Secretary Panetta and General Myers and come to one of your meetings. It's a thrill to know that they're participating, and a special thrill to know that the first recipient of the award was Earl Warren, who was a good friend of our family. We knew very well.
Great, great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming.
Okay.